Blood-red streaks painted the horizon as Yates Dawson crested the hill, the dying rays of sun illuminating a sight that stopped his heart cold: a toppled wagon on the vast prairie, and two motionless figures beside it. Spring of 1875 was turning cruel on the New Mexico territory, and this lonely stretch between Santa Fe and Abiquiu had claimed more souls than he cared to count. Pulling the brim of his hat lower, he urged his horse forward, 6 years of rangering having taught him to expect the worst but prepare for anything. The first body lay face down, dried blood caked across a woman's back where bullets had torn through her calico dress. A day dead, maybe 2. Wolves hadn't found her yet. Small mercies. But it was the second figure that drew Yates from his saddle in a hurry. A young woman, barely conscious, her golden brown hair matted with dust, lay curled protectively against the dead woman's side. "Madam." Yates knelt beside her, touching her shoulder gently. "Can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open green as spring grass, confusion and fear warring in her gaze before settling on his face. "Mama," she whispered, her voice cracked from thirst. "Help Mama." Yates swallowed hard. "I'm afraid your mama's gone, miss. Been gone a while now." The young woman's lips trembled as understanding dawned. She tried to push herself up but collapsed back, a soft cry escaping her lips. Yates noticed then the blood soaking through her skirts, the unnatural angle of her ankle. "My name's Yates Dawson. I'm going to help you," he said, reaching for his canteen. "What's yours?" "Rose," she whispered after taking a shallow sip. "Rose O'Malley. Miss O'Malley, I need to get you somewhere safe. You're hurt bad." She clutched at his sleeve with surprising strength. "Not without Mama, please. Don't leave her for the animals." Night was falling fast, and Yates knew traveling in darkness with an injured woman would be dangerous. Yet something in those green eyes made refusal impossible. "I'll bury her proper," he promised. "Then I'm taking you to Abiquiu. There's a doctor there." As Rose drifted back into unconsciousness, Yates set to work. The sandy soil made for shallow digging, but he worked until his hands blistered, the moon rising high overhead. He wrapped the dead woman in a blanket from his pack, lowered her gently into the grave, and said what prayers he remembered from childhood. By lantern light, he examined Rose more carefully. Her ankle was broken, and she had a long gash along her thigh that had bled profusely but seemed to have slowed. Fever had begun to set in. Carefully bandaging her wounds with strips from his spare shirt, Yates constructed a makeshift travois from the wagon's broken boards and attached it to his horse. "Hold on, Miss O'Malley," he murmured as he secured her to the travois. "Dawn's coming, and we've got ground to cover." As first light broke, Yates led his horse slowly across the prairie, frequently checking on his charge. Her breathing was labored, her skin burning with fever, but she clung stubbornly to life. Occasionally, she would wake, disoriented and calling for her mother, and Yates would pause to give her water and reassurances. By mid-afternoon, the small settlement of Abiquiu appeared on the horizon, its adobe buildings glowing warm in the sunlight. Yates had never been so grateful to see the dusty outpost. He urged his tired horse forward, relief flooding through him as Dr. Samuel Wilson's weathered shingle came into view. "Good God, man," the doctor exclaimed, rushing from his porch as Yates pulled up. "What happened?" "Found her out past the eastern ridge. Mother's dead raiders, I reckon. She's got a broken ankle and a bad leg wound. Fever's high." Dr. Wilson immediately called for his wife, and together they carried Rose inside. Yates paced the small waiting room, hat in hand, as sounds of activity came from behind the closed examination room door. Hours later, the doctor emerged, wiping his hands on a stained cloth. "She'll live," he pronounced, and Yates felt a tension he hadn't realized he'd been carrying release from his shoulders. Infection's setting in, but I've cleaned it best I can. The bone's set. She's young and strong, good chance for recovery. Does she have any folks we should notify? Yates asked. Dr. Wilson shook his head. She was delirious, but she said enough. Seems they were heading to California from Missouri. Father died of fever back in Santa Fe. Just her and her mother trying to make it west to some relatives. Yates nodded, his throat tight. I'll pay for her care, Doc. That's mighty decent, but what then? She's got no one now. The question hung in the air, and Yates had no answer. He was a former Texas Ranger turned cattle driver, headed to a new job at the Pearson Ranch outside of town. He had no business taking responsibility for an orphaned young woman. Let me worry about that when she's better, he finally said. May I see her? Rose lay pale against the sheets, her face still beautiful despite the ordeal she'd endured. Yates stood awkwardly by the bedside, hat twisting in his calloused hands. He'd buried her mother and saved her life, but he was a stranger to her. Yet something about her vulnerability stirred a protectiveness in him he hadn't felt since leaving the Rangers. I'll check back tomorrow, he told the doctor's wife, who nodded sympathetically. For the next week, Yates divided his time between his new job at Pearson Ranch and daily visits to Rose. Her fever broke on the third day, and by the fifth, she was sitting up, able to speak more clearly about what had happened. We were resting, she told him, her hands folded in her lap, knuckles white. 3 men rode up. They seemed friendly at first, asked for directions to Santa Fe. Then one of them noticed Mama's wedding ring. Her voice wavered. When she refused to give it up, they shot her. I tried to run, but one of them caught me. I fought him off, but I fell down the embankment. They must have thought I was dead, too. Yates fought back fury at the cowards who would murder a woman for a simple gold band. Did you recognize any of them? Rose shook her head. One had a scar across his chin. Another wore a red bandana. Yates nodded, filing the descriptions away. Miss O'Malley, I need to ask, do you have any relations who might take you in? Her eyes filled with tears. My aunt and uncle in Sacramento, but I've never met them. They were my father's people. She looked up at him, vulnerability and pride warring in her expression. Mr. Dawson, I'm grateful beyond words for what you've done, but I don't expect charity. Once I'm healed, I'll find work. I can sew and cook. I'm educated, I could teach children. Abiquiu's a small place, Yates said gently, and you'll need time to heal proper. Before Rose could respond, Dr. Wilson entered the room. Miss O'Malley, I've been speaking with Senora Hernandez. She runs the boarding house and needs help with bookkeeping. She's willing to give you room and board in exchange for work once you're able. Light duties at first. Relief washed over Rose's face. I'm very good with figures. My father was a banker. 2 weeks later, with her ankle splinted and her leg healing well, Rose moved into Senora Hernandez's boarding house. Yates helped her settle in, carrying her small trunk of salvaged belongings from the wagon. Thank you, she said as he set the trunk down in her modest room. For everything. I would have died out there beside my mother if not for you. Yates shifted uncomfortably under her direct gaze. At 28, he'd faced down outlaws and survived a Comanche raid, but this slip of a woman made him feel like a tongue-tied boy. Anyone would have done the same, he muttered. No, Rose said firmly. They wouldn't have. You buried my mother with respect when many would have left her. You could have dropped me at the doctor's and ridden away, but you paid for my care and checked on me every day. Her voice softened. I won't forget that, Mr. Dawson. Yates, he corrected. Mr. Dawson was my father. A small smile touched her lips. Yates, then. Summer arrived, bringing scorching days and warm nights to Abiquiu. Rose thrived under Senora Hernandez's care. her natural intelligence and work ethic quickly making her indispensable at the boarding house. As her strength returned, she took on more responsibilities, eventually helping with cooking and cleaning alongside the bookkeeping. Yates continued his work at Pearson Ranch, breaking horses and driving cattle. Every Sunday, he would ride into town, cleaned up and wearing his one good shirt, to attend church services. If anyone noticed that he always managed to sit in the same pew as Rose and Senora Hernandez, they didn't comment. After services one July morning, Yates approached Rose as she chatted with the pastor's wife. "Miss O'Malley, I was wondering if you might like to take a walk. It's a fine day." Rose's cheeks colored slightly as she nodded. "I'd like that very much." They strolled through the small town, Rose walking with only a slight limp now, until they reached the shade of a large cottonwood tree near the river. "How are you finding life in Abiquiu?" Yates asked, suddenly aware of how few proper conversations they'd had. "It's growing on me," Rose admitted. "The people have been kind. Senora Hernandez treats me like a daughter." She paused, looking toward the distant mountains. "But I still wake up sometimes thinking I'll find my mother in the next room." "Grief takes time," Yates said quietly. "After my brother died in the war, I thought the pain would swallow me whole. It doesn't go away, but it changes shape, becomes something you can carry." Rose studied his face. "You don't talk much about yourself." Yates shrugged. "Not much to tell that's worth hearing." "I disagree," she said simply. "Tell me about Texas." So he did. He told her about growing up on a small ranch outside of Dallas, about joining the Rangers at 19 after his parents died of fever, about the years spent tracking outlaws and keeping peace along the border. He told her about his decision to leave that life behind after seeing too much death. Rose listened intently, asking thoughtful questions. As the afternoon waned, they walked back toward town, their conversation flowing more easily. "I never thanked you properly," Rose said as they reached the boarding house, "for the flowers you've been leaving." Yates felt heat rise in his face. For weeks, he'd been leaving wildflowers on the boarding house porch before dawn, never signing his name. "How did you know?" "Senora Hernandez has eyes everywhere," Rose said with a small laugh. "And you're the only man in Abiquiu who would pick wildflowers but be too shy to deliver them in person." "I'm not good with words," he admitted, "but I wanted you to have something beautiful while you healed." Her eyes softened. "Would you like to come for supper tomorrow night? I'm making stew." The invitation hung between them, simple yet significant. "I'd be honored," Yates replied. That supper was the first of many. Throughout the late summer and early fall, Yates became a regular at Senora Hernandez's table. The widow watched with knowing eyes as the quiet cowboy and the determined young woman circled each other, their friendship deepening with each passing week. Rose flourished in Abiquiu. She began teaching reading and arithmetic to several of the local children in the evenings, earning extra money to save for her future. Her natural warmth and intelligence made her popular in the small community, and more than one eligible bachelor began finding reasons to visit the boarding house. Yates noticed the attention she received with a growing sense of unease. Who was he to stake a claim on Rose O'Malley? She deserved someone with prospects, education, someone who could give her more than a cowboy's uncertain future. In late September, he rode into town after a 2-week cattle drive to find Rose sitting on the boarding house porch with Thomas Ellis, the banker's son. They were laughing together, and something twisted painfully in Yates's chest at the sight. He tipped his hat stiffly as he passed, unable to bring himself to interrupt their conversation. That evening, a knock came at the door of the small cabin Yates rented on the edge of Pearson property. He opened it to find Rose standing there, a determined set to her jaw. "You rode right by today without stopping," she said without preamble. You seemed occupied, he replied, more gruffly than he intended. Is that what you think? That I was too occupied with Thomas Ellis to spare time for you, her green eyes flashed. For someone so observant, Yates Dawson, you can be remarkably blind. He stared at her, confusion replacing his earlier resentment. What are you saying, Rose? I'm saying that Thomas Ellis could recite poetry all day and buy me silk dresses from Santa Fe, but he isn't the man who found me dying on the prairie. He isn't the man who buried my mother with dignity. He isn't the man I think about from sunrise to sunset. Her voice had grown softer, more vulnerable. He isn't you. Yates stood frozen, the words he'd been holding back for months caught in his throat. If you don't feel the same, Rose continued, her courage faltering slightly, then I'll go now and we can forget this happened. In answer, Yates took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. I've been falling in love with you since I first saw your eyes open on that prairie, he admitted, but I never thought I had the right to say so. Why? She asked. You deserve better than a cowboy with nothing to his name but a horse and saddle. Rose stepped closer. I deserve a man who sees me for who I am, a man with honor and kindness, a man brave enough to love someone despite the fear of loss. Her hand came up to touch his face. That's you, Yates Dawson. In the soft light of the oil lamp, Yates bent his head and kissed her, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence as she responded. When they parted, both were breathless. I should get back, Rose whispered. Senora Hernandez will worry. Yates nodded, reluctant to let go of her hand. May I call on you properly? Take you to supper at the hotel Saturday night. Her smile was radiant. I'd like that very much. Word spread quickly in Abiquiu that Yates Dawson was courting Rose O'Malley. Some whispered that it was too soon after her tragedy. Others that a former ranger wasn't settled enough for a respectable young woman. But those who had watched them over the months saw the rightness in their match, his quiet strength complementing her resilient spirit. As winter approached, Yates took on additional work, saving every penny. On Christmas Eve, 6 months after he'd found Rose on the prairie, he asked her to walk with him after the community celebration at the church. Snow dusted the ground, unusual for Abiquiu, turning the landscape silver in the moonlight. They strolled to the river, where Yates had laid a blanket beneath their cottonwood tree. It's beautiful, Rose breathed, looking at the stars overhead. Not as beautiful as you, Yates said, gathering his courage. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small wooden box he'd carved himself. Rose O'Malley, I never believed in fate until I found you. I can't offer you riches or an easy life, but I can promise to love and protect you until my dying day. He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small pearl. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Tears glistened in Rose's eyes as she took the box with trembling fingers. Where did you get this? Saved for it, Yates admitted. Had it sent from Santa Fe. Is it all right? It's perfect, she whispered, then looked up at him with a radiant smile. Yes, Yates Dawson, I will marry you. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her close, kissing her with all the love and promise he felt in his heart. They were married on a clear February morning in 1876, with most of Abiquiu in attendance. Senora Hernandez wept openly as she gave Rose away, and even taciturn Mr. Pearson grinned broadly as his former employee took his vows. Rose wore a simple white dress she'd sewn herself, with wildflowers in her hair. Yates, in a new suit bought specifically for the occasion, could barely speak his vows for the emotion clogging his throat. I now pronounce you man and wife, the pastor declared, and cheers erupted from the gathered community. Their wedding celebration lasted well into the evening, with dancing and feasting in the town square. As the newlyweds prepared to depart for the small house Yates had purchased on the edge of town, Senora Hernandez pulled Rose into a tight embrace. "Your mother would be proud," she whispered. "You have found a good man." Tears pricked Rose's eyes as she nodded. "I wish she could have known him." "She knows," the older woman assured her. "The ones we love never truly leave us." Their first months of marriage passed in a happy blur as they settled into their new home. Yates continued working at Pearson Ranch, while Rose maintained her teaching and helped with the accounts at several businesses in town. Together, they planted a garden, repaired the house, and dreamed of the future. In late summer, as they sat on their porch watching a thunderstorm roll across the distant mesas, Rose took Yates's hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "We're going to have a baby," she said softly. Joy unlike anything Yates had ever known flooded through him. He gathered his wife into his arms, burying his face in her hair to hide his tears. "I never thought I could be this happy," he confessed. "Never thought I deserved it." "You deserve everything good in this world," Rose told him firmly, "and so much more." As her pregnancy progressed, Yates became even more protective, often driving Rose to distraction with his constant concern. "I'm with child, not made of glass," she reminded him one evening as he insisted on carrying a basket of laundry that weighed practically nothing. "Can't help it," he admitted sheepishly. "I couldn't bear it if anything happened to you or the baby." Understanding softened her exasperation. "Nothing will happen. We're strong, this child and I." But January brought a harsh winter to New Mexico territory, and with it, complications. Rose fell ill with a fever that left her weak and struggling. Dr. Wilson visited daily, his expression growing more concerned as the baby's arrival drew near. "She needs more care than I can provide here," he finally admitted to Yates. "The hospital in Santa Fe would be better equipped, but she's in no condition to travel that far." Yates paced their small home, fear clawing at his throat. "There must be something we can do. Keep her comfortable. Pray." The doctor placed a hand on Yates's shoulder. "She's strong, Dawson. Don't lose hope." That night, as Rose slept fitfully, Yates knelt beside their bed, something he hadn't done since childhood. "I've never asked much of you," he whispered, "but I'm asking now. Don't take them from me, please." Morning brought a break in Rose's fever and a renewed strength that amazed Dr. Wilson. "I've never seen anything like it," he admitted. "Whatever you did, it worked." 2 weeks later, in the midst of a snowstorm, Rose gave birth to a healthy son. They named him William, after Yates's father, and Samuel, after the doctor who had helped save both mother and child. "He has your eyes," Rose murmured as they gazed at their son, his tiny hand wrapped around Yates's finger. "And your determination," Yates replied, remembering how the infant had entered the world with lusty cries that belied his early arrival. "He'll be a fighter, like his mother." Spring came, melting the snow and bringing new growth to their garden. Rose recovered her strength as William thrived, and life settled into a rhythm of deep contentment. Yates often found himself pausing in his work to marvel at how completely his life had transformed in just 1 year. On the anniversary of the day he'd found Rose on the prairie, Yates took her and William to the spot where her mother was buried. They had placed a proper headstone there months earlier, but this was Rose's first visit since her rescue. "I want to thank her," Yates explained as he helped Rose down from the wagon William bundled in her arms, "for raising a daughter strong enough to survive." Rose stood before the grave, tears streaming down her face. "Mama would have loved you," she told Yates. "And she would have adored her grandson." "I promise to take care of them both," Yates said quietly to the headstone, "for as long as I draw breath." As they made their way back to the wagon, Rose paused, looking out over the prairie where her life had nearly ended and in another way begun anew. "I used to think that day was the worst of my life," she said. "And it was terrible beyond words to lose Mama. But now I understand that even in our darkest moments, seeds of hope are planted." She looked up at Yates, her green eyes clear and loving. "You are my seed of hope, Yates Dawson." He drew her and William close, overcome with gratitude for the family he'd never expected to have. "And you were mine, Rose Dawson, and you were mine." Years passed, bringing changes to both the Dawson family and Abiquiu. By 1880, Yates had saved enough to buy a small cattle ranch of his own, where they raised William and, 2 years later, welcomed a daughter they named Elizabeth. Rose's teaching expanded into a proper school, which she ran from a building Yates and the townsmen constructed near the church. One crisp autumn evening in 1882, as they sat on their porch watching 7-year-old William teach his sister how to lasso a fence post, Yates turned to his wife. "You ever think about what might have happened if I hadn't ridden over that hill when I did?" he asked. Rose considered the question, her hand finding his. "Sometimes. But then I remember something my father used to say, 'The Lord never takes without giving.'" She squeezed his fingers. "He took my parents, but he gave me you and our children and this life we've built. I can't regret the path that led me here, even if parts of the journey were painful." Yates nodded, understanding. "I rode a lot of trails before I found you. Spent years thinking my purpose was chasing outlaws and keeping the peace. Never imagined this was what I was meant for all along." "And what's that?" Rose asked, a smile playing at her lips. "Love," he said simply. "Family. Building something that matters." As the sun set over the New Mexico landscape they both had come to cherish, their children's laughter rang out across the yard. Yates pulled Rose closer, marveling at how a moment of tragedy on a desolate prairie had transformed into a lifetime of joy. "Do you think we'll grow old together here?" Rose asked, her head resting on his shoulder. "God willing," Yates replied. "Can't imagine being anywhere else. Or with anyone else." And as stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Rose thought of her mother's grave on the distant prairie, marked now with flowers and visited regularly. She thought of the journey that had brought her, broken and dying, into the arms of the man who would become her husband, father of her children, partner in all things. "I love you, Yates Dawson," she whispered. "Every day I thank God you found me." "I found you," he agreed, kissing her temple gently. "But you saved me right back." The following spring brought new opportunities to Abiquiu as the railroad finally reached nearby Espanola, connecting the remote community more directly to the wider world. Rose's school flourished with the arrival of new families, and Yates expanded their ranch operations to include breeding horses, developing a reputation for quality stock throughout the territory. By their 10th wedding anniversary in 1886, the Dawsons had become pillars of the community. Their family had grown again with the birth of their third child, a son they named James, who arrived with the same determination as his older brother, but his mother's thoughtful nature. On a warm June evening, as they prepared for the town's annual summer festival, a stranger arrived at their ranch. Yates was in the corral with William, now 11, and showing a natural aptitude with horses when a dust-covered rider approached. "Looking for the Dawson place," the man called. "Got word in town this is it." Yates stepped forward, protective instincts heightened by years as a ranger. "I'm Yates Dawson. What can I do for you?" The stranger dismounted, revealing a face weathered by sun and age. "Name's Marshal Frank Cooper out of Santa Fe. Been tracking a group of bandits these past months." He pulled a folded paper from his vest. "One of them was captured last week after a botched stagecoach robbery. Before he was hanged, he confessed to a murder about 11 years back woman and her daughter on the prairie east of here." Yates felt his blood run cold. The daughter survived. The marshal's eyes sharpened. "That's so, she's my wife," Yates said, his voice steady despite the emotions churning inside him. "Rose O'Malley Dawson. I found her with her mother's body. Buried the mother, brought Rose to the doctor in Abiquiu." William looked up at his father, confusion clear on his young face. Yates placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "Go tell your mother we have a visitor, Will. Tell her it's important." As William ran toward the house, Marshal Cooper handed Yates the paper. "These are the names and descriptions of the 3 men involved. The one we hanged was Jeremiah Tate. The other 2 brothers named Carson are still at large, but we've got leads in Arizona Territory." Yates unfolded the paper, scanning the descriptions. One matched perfectly the man with the scarred chin Rose had described all those years ago. The other, with the red bandana, was clearly the second outlaw. His fingers tightened on the paper. "Frank and Howard Carson," he read aloud, committing the names to memory. Rose appeared on the porch, wiping her hands on her apron, little James on her hip and Elizabeth at her side. Her eyes widened at the sight of the marshal, and Yates saw her instinctively pull the children closer. "Rose," Yates called, his voice gentle. "The marshal has news about what happened to your mother." Understanding dawned in her eyes, and she handed James to Elizabeth. "Take your brother inside, Lizzie. I need to speak with your father and the marshal." Once the children were inside, Rose joined them by the corral, her face composed but pale. "You found them. After all this time," Marshal Cooper nodded, removing his hat respectfully. "One of them, madam, he's been dealt with by the law. The other 2 we're still hunting. Your husband has their names and descriptions now." Rose's eyes met Yates's, and he saw in them the same turmoil. He felt relief that justice was finally within reach, fear at reopening old wounds, uncertainty about what came next. "Thank you, Marshal," she said formally. "Will you stay for supper? You've ridden a long way." The marshal accepted gratefully, and over the meal he shared more details about the outlaw's other crimes and the ongoing pursuit. The Carson brothers had left a trail of robbery and murder across 3 territories, becoming increasingly violent and reckless. After the marshal departed the next morning, promising to send word when the remaining outlaws were captured, Rose and Yates sat together on their porch swing, the children already asleep. "What are you thinking?" Yates asked, watching her profile in the lamplight. "I'm thinking that for years I've imagined those men getting away with what they did," she answered slowly. "Living their lives while my mother lay in a grave. Part of me wants them brought to justice more than anything." "And the other part?" Yates prompted. Rose turned to him, her eyes troubled. "The other part is afraid. What if learning they've been caught doesn't bring the peace I've hoped for? What if it just brings back the pain?" Yates took her hand, running his thumb over the simple gold band he'd placed there a decade ago. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together. The men who killed your mother will answer for what they did, whether that brings you peace or not." "I've built a good life here," Rose said, gazing out at their ranch. "A beautiful life with you and our children. Sometimes I worry that looking back will somehow threaten what we have now." "Nothing can threaten what we have," Yates assured her firmly. "What we've built is stronger than any shadow from the past." Rose leaned her head against his shoulder, drawing comfort from his solid presence. "When I was a girl, my father used to say that forgiveness isn't about forgetting the wrong, but about refusing to let it poison your future." "Wise man," Yates murmured. "I think I'm ready to try that," she said softly. "Not for their sake, but for mine, for ours." The next morning, Rose gathered the children after breakfast, her expression serious but gentle. "There's a story I need to tell you about how your father and I met. It's sad in parts, but it has a happy ending." "William," Elizabeth, and even 4-year-old James listened with wide eyes as their mother explained how their grandmother had been killed by bad men, and how their father had found Rose injured and alone on the prairie. "Your father saved my life," Rose told them, her voice filled with emotion. "He buried my mother with respect and brought me to safety. That's how our family began, with an act of kindness and courage." "Is that why you named me William Samuel?" her oldest son asked thoughtfully. "After the doctor who helped you?" Rose nodded, proud of his perceptiveness. "Exactly so." "And your sister is Elizabeth Mary, after both our mothers." Little James clambered onto his father's lap. "Were you scared, Pa, when you found Mama?" Yates considered the question seriously. "I was scared for your Mama because she was hurt badly, but I wasn't scared to help her. Sometimes doing the right thing is more important than being afraid." The children absorbed this lesson quietly, and over the following days, Yates noticed them playing a new game, one of rescue and healing, with William invariably taking the role of the heroic cowboy, finding someone in need. Months passed without word from Marshall Cooper. The Dawson family continued their daily lives, ranching, teaching, growing. Rose's school expanded again, requiring the hiring of a second teacher, a young woman from Chicago who brought new ideas and enthusiasm to Abiquiu's education. Christmas of 1886 approached, bringing with it preparations for holiday celebrations. Yates had ridden to Santa Fe for supplies and special gifts for the children, returning home on a cold, clear evening to find unexpected horses tied outside their house. His hand moved instinctively to the pistol he still wore, old habits resurfacing, but he relaxed when he recognized Marshall Cooper's mount. The second horse, however, was unfamiliar. Inside, he found Rose seated at their dining table with the marshal and another man younger, wearing a deputy's badge. "Yates," Rose said, rising to greet him. Her eyes held a complex mixture of emotions. "Marshal Cooper has brought news." The marshal stood, extending his hand. "Dawson." "We caught them both. The Carson brothers are dead." Yates felt a weight he'd carried for over a decade begin to lift. "Dead," the young deputy spoke up. "Resisted arrest outside Tucson. Opened fire on our posse. We returned fire." Rose's hands trembled slightly as she poured coffee for Yates. "The marshal brought something. Something that belonged to my mother." Cooper reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object that glinted in the lamplight, a gold wedding band, simple but well crafted. "Found it on Howard Carson's person. He'd kept it all these years like a trophy." The marshal's face hardened with disgust. "Thought you might want it back, madam." Rose took the ring reverently, tears spilling down her cheeks. "This was my father's last gift to her. She refused to give it up, even when they threatened her." She closed her fingers around it, bringing her fist to her heart. "Thank you for returning it to our family." After the lawman departed, promising to send official documentation of the outlaws' deaths for Rose's peace of mind, Yates found his wife standing by the window, still holding her mother's ring. "Are you all right?" he asked, placing his hands gently on her shoulders. "I feel lighter," she admitted. "Not happy exactly, but like a door has finally closed on that chapter of our lives." She turned to face him. "Is it wrong to feel relief that they're dead?" "No," Yates said honestly. "They took your mother's life without remorse. They would have taken yours too if they could. The world's better without men like that in it." Rose opened her palm, looking at the ring. "I want to give this to Elizabeth someday. Tell her it's her grandmother's legacy, not the violence that took her life, but the courage that defined it." Yates nodded, understanding the importance of how they framed their family's story for their children. "Your mother would be proud of that. Proud of you." That night, after the children were asleep, Rose and Yates stood together on their porch, watching stars emerge in the clear winter sky. The air was crisp with the promise of snow, but wrapped in a blanket with her husband's arm around her waist, Rose felt only warmth. "You know what today is?" she asked softly. Yates considered for a moment. "December 20th, the day before winter solstice." "And 12 years to the day since you found me on the prairie," Rose reminded him. 12 years since you buried my mother and saved me." She turned in his arms to face him. "Sometimes I try to imagine what my life would have been if you hadn't come along that day. If someone else had found me, or if no one had come at all." "Don't," Yates said, his voice rough with emotion. "I can't bear thinking of a world where I didn't find you." "That's just it," Rose said, reaching up to touch his face. "I believe you were meant to find me. That even in my darkest hour, something greater than ourselves was at work." Yates covered her hand with his own, turning to press a kiss to her palm. "I've never been a man for flowery words or grand philosophies, but I know this: loving you has been the purpose of my life. Everything before was just preparation." Rose smiled, the same smile that had captured his heart all those years ago. "Then we're both exactly where we're meant to be." As snowflakes began to fall gently around them, Yates pulled his wife closer, marveling at the journey that had brought them to this moment, from a blood-soaked prairie to a home filled with love and children's laughter. They had faced tragedy and triumph together, building a life neither could have imagined in those first desperate hours of their meeting. "Dance with me," Rose whispered, and there on their porch, surrounded by softly falling snow, Yates Dawson danced with the woman he'd once found dying beside her mother's body, the woman who had become his heart, his home, and his enduring hope. In the spring of 1887, as wildflowers bloomed across the New Mexico landscape, the Dawson family gathered at the site of Mary O'Malley's grave. 11 years of weathering had worn the wooden cross Yates originally placed, but the stone marker remained solid. Rose had planted hardy perennials around the site years earlier, and they returned faithfully each season, transforming the once desolate spot into a place of beauty. "I brought something for Grandma," Elizabeth said solemnly, approaching the grave with a small bouquet of bluebonnets. At 7, she had her mother's eyes and her father's quiet determination. William, now 12 and nearly as tall as Rose, helped his younger brother place a carved wooden bird beside the flowers. James had crafted it himself, showing a natural talent for woodworking that Yates encouraged. "Your grandmother would have loved you all so much," Rose told her children, her voice steady despite the emotion of the moment. "And she would be so proud of the family we've become." Yates stood slightly apart, watching his wife and children pay their respects. He thought about the frightened, dying young woman he'd found here, and the strong, compassionate woman she'd become. Every challenge they'd faced, from her recovery to building their ranch, from raising their children to waiting for justice, had only strengthened the bond between them. As the family returned to their wagon for the journey home, Rose fell into step beside Yates, slipping her hand into his. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" he asked. "For making this pilgrimage with us every year, for understanding why it matters to me, for helping our children know their grandmother through our stories." Yates squeezed her hand. "Our children should know where they come from, the good and the difficult both." Back at their ranch, life continued its steady rhythm. Their cattle operation prospered, and Rose's school became known throughout the territory for its progressive approach to education. William showed promise as a rancher, working alongside his father with increasing responsibility. Elizabeth revealed a brilliant mind for mathematics and science, devouring every book Rose could procure for her. James, the youngest, combined his father's quiet strength with a surprising artistic talent. In the summer of 1890, as they celebrated their 14th wedding anniversary, a letter arrived from Sacramento, California. Rose opened it with trembling fingers. It was from her father's brother, the uncle she had never met, but had been traveling to find when tragedy struck. How did he find us after all this time? Yates wondered as Rose read the letter silently, her expression shifting from surprise to wonder. He's been searching for years, she explained, looking up. After we never arrived in Sacramento, he made inquiries, but information was scarce. Finally, he placed notices in newspapers across the Western Territories. Someone from Santa Fe recognized our story and wrote to him. "What does he say?" Yates asked, noting the thickness of the envelope. Rose's eyes filled with tears. "He says he's sorry he couldn't find us sooner. That he and Aunt Martha have thought of us often over the years, wondering what became of my mother and me." She turned the page. "He's enclosed family photographs my father as a young man, grandparents I never knew existed." She spread the photographs on their kitchen table, and together they examined faces that shared Rose's features, the same green eyes, the same determined set to the jaw. For the first time, their children saw relatives from their mother's side of the family, connecting them to a heritage beyond their immediate experience. "Will you write back?" Yates asked that evening after the children had gone to bed. Rose nodded. "I'll tell him about our life here. About you and the children, about what happened to Mother." She paused, her fingers tracing the edge of one of the photographs. "He says they're too elderly to travel now, but they would welcome us in Sacramento if we ever wished to visit." "Would you like that?" Yates asked carefully. "To visit California," Rose considered the question. "Perhaps someday, but not now. Our life is here, our home is here." She looked around their comfortable house, built room by room as their family grew. "Mother and I were seeking family when disaster struck. But I found my family right here with you." In the years that followed, Rose maintained correspondence with her uncle and aunt, exchanging photographs and news. The connection brought her a sense of completion, filling in pieces of her past without disrupting the life she and Yates had built together. As their children grew into young adults, the legacy of how their parents met continued to shape their values and choices. William, at 18, joined a posse to track cattle rustlers, showing the same courage his father had as a ranger. When he returned, he told Yates, "I understand now why you did what you did for Mother. Some things are worth risking everything for." Elizabeth, scholarly and determined, secured a place at a women's college in Denver, the first girl from Abiquiu to pursue higher education. Before leaving, she asked for her grandmother's wedding ring, which Rose had preserved for her. "I want to carry her strength with me," she explained. Young James, now 13, remained at home, working the ranch with his father and developing his skills as a craftsman. He had his mother's thoughtfulness and his father's steady hands, creating beautiful pieces from wood and leather that people increasingly sought to purchase. In 1895, 20 years after Yates found Rose on the prairie, they hosted a gathering at their ranch to celebrate the milestone. Friends from throughout the region attended, many of whom had been part of their story from the beginning. Dr. Wilson, now retired but still sharp-minded. Senora Hernandez, her hair white but her spirit undimmed. Former Marshal Cooper, who had retired to Abiquiu after years of service. As twilight fell and lanterns illuminated their large yard, Yates found Rose standing alone near their garden, looking toward the distant hills where her mother rested. "Penny for your thoughts," he said softly, coming to stand beside her. "I was thinking about time," she replied. "How it changes everything and nothing at all. 20 years have passed since that terrible day, yet in some ways it feels like yesterday." Yates nodded, understanding. At 53, his hair had silvered at the temples, and the years of ranching had left their mark on his body. Rose, at 41, remained beautiful to him, the lines around her eyes speaking of both laughter and sorrow weathered with grace. "I look at our children," Rose continued, "and I see the future we've created from the ashes of the past. William with his sense of justice, Elizabeth with her courage to forge new paths, James with his ability to create beauty from raw materials." She turned to Yates, her eyes bright in the fading light. "We did well, didn't we? Despite how it all began." "Because of how it began," Yates corrected gently. "What happened to you and your mother was tragic beyond words, but it brought us together, and together we've built something that honors her memory." Rose leaned into him, their bodies fitting together with the familiar comfort of 2 decades' companionship. "I used to wonder if I'd ever stop missing her. Now I know I never will, but the missing has changed. It's become part of who I am, not a wound that threatens to break me." From the yard came the sound of music, starting fiddles and guitars striking up a lively tune. William appeared at the garden gate, his young wife Emily beside him, both smiling expectantly. "They're waiting for you too," William called. "Can't have an anniversary celebration without the couple of honor dancing." Rose laughed, the sound as dear to Yates now as it had been when he first heard it. "Shall we show these youngsters how it's done, Mr. Dawson?" "With pleasure, Mrs. Dawson," he replied, offering his arm with a flourish that made her laugh again. As they joined the dancing, friends and family clearing a space for them at the center. Yates held his wife close and thought about the strange, winding path that had led them here. From a blood-soaked prairie to this moment of pure joy, from a grave dug with blistered hands to 3 children grown strong and true, from a dying woman with green eyes to the partner who had shared his life for 20 remarkable years. "I love you, Rose Dawson," he whispered as they turned in the dance, "more with each passing day." "And I love you," she answered, her eyes reflecting the lantern light and so much more wisdom earned through hardship, joy discovered in healing, and the enduring promise of a love that had begun in tragedy but blossomed into something beautiful beyond measure. "My cowboy who buried one woman and saved another." The music swelled around them, and as they danced under the vast New Mexico sky, surrounded by the family and community they'd built together, both knew with absolute certainty that though their story had begun with death on a lonely prairie, it would continue with life and love for all their remaining days.